everyone, I'm Ryan,
I'm Alex.
and this is Between Shelf and Screen.
Today we're going to be doing a review on The Road, the book specifically by Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, and this is a very highly rated book. It won, the Pulitzer
Yeah,
Prize?
Pulitzer Prize winner.
Do I think that it should have... I'm going to be kind of controversial here and say this is not worth that prize. I don't really understand how they picked that, but this should not be.
Well, I say before we get into that, kind of explain it. Yeah. So you say kind of your synopsis.
Right. So
tell them what's about.
To go over kind of just what this book covers, in my own words, I would say that it's a post-apocalyptic novel that describes nothing of the apocalypse and only about the father and son walking along a road for several miles years after the apocalypse had started. This whole book exists entirely about the father and son's relationship, while it is up to the reader to really judge how deep this concept can go.
Yeah, I have a better, well, not a better opinion. That's the wrong word. I have a more kind opinion of The Road. She really hated it. Reading it, I had to text her and be like, start reading. And she always falls asleep.
Yeah, it really was a struggle to get through. It genuinely, I would get 5 pages in and I'd be so bored. I would just want to go to sleep. Normally I'm not like that, but this book exhausted me, and it's only 200.
Yeah, 230 pages. It's really not a big book. And my opinion, where I fall, probably hating it, liking it, I'm probably in the middle, a little bit verging into not liking it so much.
Right. So what would your star rating be?
Oh man, I don't like the star rating, but I'll do it.
Just in general, our star ratings are not specific, and these are just our opinions.
Right. Yeah, we should have already mentioned that too. This is completely 100% our opinions, subjective. We will say objective things, we're objectively we think it's this way, but at the end of the day, it's all subjective. This is all our opinions, and no opinion about this book is wrong.
And if you really enjoyed it, we are happy for you, because this really does move people, but it just, at least for me, it really didn't get anywhere.
Yeah, but I think we should also, we got to get into what we liked, at least. We should at least give it a shot. So things you liked about this book. Right. I think you should start.
Yeah, we're going to cover that, but first I would say, to give a general idea of what we both think about this book, we're going to give a general star rating and then further discuss our likes and dislikes and everything. So I would say for me, I would give this book about 2 stars. Pretty solid, flat 2 stars.
I think I would sit at probably 2.75. So,
just under.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So.
Things you liked.
Yes, things I liked. Okay. I don't know about other people, but for me, to this day, no matter how many books I read, I suck at memorizing names. And there are 0 names in this book. There are barely any characters. So I really could follow the book throughout because I didn't have to worry about memorizing all these different characters and everything. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That is a good point. Yeah,
I like that part.
It's literally the man, the boy. That's it.
Yeah. And there's the stranger.
Yeah. Stranger number 1, stranger number 2. It doesn't say that, but it's basically that. Yeah. They're extras.
Yeah.
They're plot points.
Basically.
Yeah.
So if you also don't if you also don't like having to memorize different characters' names and know all these different characters, this might allude to you. Because it's just straight through following the same 2 characters.
Yeah. Do you want me to do what I liked?
Yeah.
So, I guess what I liked, first off, and I think this can't be understated, his description is pretty amazing. really good. To the point where like you're not having to imagine the scenery at all. You're not having to fill in the blanks with your mind at any point. Like it's so specific, and it's very gray all the time. But it's very like dismal. Like you're just kind of like the whole time you're going through it, you're just like, man, this is a bummer. And that's kind of the point of it. And I think what he sought out to do with this book, I think he accomplished, which is not a happy story. It's like a tragedy throughout, and it's not uplifting. It's just like it's a post-apocalyptic kind of realistic version of how it would be. And I think what he set out to do, he accomplished well. In the description, it's really good.
And we'll go further into what he wanted to accomplish and what happened. We're just spewing out generalizations, and then we'll go into spoilers later. So if this book does interest you, give it a shot. If this is something that you would like, I would say give it a shot and don't listen to the rest because we will be going over spoilers.
Yeah.
Who do you think would like this kind of book?
Yeah, it's weird because I've seen, like, I would watch YouTubers, like, book reviews on it before I had finished, like, spoiler-free, and I genuinely did not see a negative one, like, a negative review. I didn't see one. So, it may just be us, but I don't know. I think, who would appeal?
We just have a hot take on this.
Yeah.
Not the majority share this. I have spoken to maybe one person that had a negative thing to say about it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone's recommended this.
Yeah.
I've seen it everywhere.
I'd say if you really like literary fiction or people that kind of like push the bounds of just like irregular storytelling, and like you like it when people play around with prose, so but literary fiction. If you like literary fiction, you're probably gonna like this. He's like Cormac McCarthy is known to be like one of the most renowned like modern literary authors. So if you're really into that, if you like artsy stuff, then you're probably gonna like this. And I do like that stuff too, but it's very hit or miss. And I think this is leaning more towards miss as far as that. But if you like literary fiction, I would say you most likely have the highest chance of liking this book.
I feel like if you can really connect to characters easily, that you will really get involved with this book. But if things like run-on sentences and weird punctuation,
Lack of punctuation.
honestly, yeah, if that will just catch you off guard and bother you, this is not for you.
If you like poetry, you're not gonna like this. You might, but I think you won't because it doesn't flow. It's just run-on sentence and run-on sentence and run-on sentence. And it would make sense. You were saying this actually. It makes sense if it was like through the lens of like the boy, like through his character lens, but it's third person limited. So you're just the narrator is anonymous, and you're just kind of following these two characters. And like the run-on sentences, were just like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. It would make sense if it was the perspective of the young boy, but it's not. And it just drones and drones, and that's why she fell asleep a lot.
It shows, or it tells instead of showing, which I am not a big fan, especially when it's literary fiction.
Yeah.
I want to be able to analyze and really dive into this. While I feel like it did not give you a lot of room to, and that was my biggest fault with this book, I would say, is there was nothing I could really dive deep into, and maybe that was just me. Other people might be able to, but I just felt like there wasn't much of that.
Yeah, and so I'll kind of talk about this a little bit. I feel like this worked really well. So like I mentioned earlier, the tropes. Well, before this podcast, we're talking a little bit about tropes, and this just so happens we're recording this when The Last of Us is coming out, and I'm really obsessed with that story. But it has the same sort of trope going on there, and the same sort of environment. So it's like post-apocalyptic, and you got a father figure and a daughter in The Last of Us. But in this, you have the father and the son. And I feel like this book kind of started that trope where it's like a father figure looking after like a daughter or a son. So it can be accredited with that. I feel like it set up the trope that we see in a lot of apocalypse movies. However, so many people did it a lot better. Especially, like, I think in The Last of Us, the best example. Like, it's literally a video game. Obviously, it's not. You can't really compare it to a book. But I feel like, as far as the story goes, I was much more involved in, like Joel and Ellie's character dynamics and relationship than I was between the man and the boy. It doesn't even give them names. You can't get personal.
I felt like, the other biggest thing I had with this book was that I did not personally connect with any of these characters, and I think part of that had to do with the fact of, like, really not knowing anything about them and their past, and I felt like being in third person that also gave it, like, further from connection, because it's hard to write a third person book and connect as easily as, like, the first person. Just generally, it is more difficult, and I felt like at least making this first person or something of the sorts would have made it easier to connect to these characters and feel like I was really involved in this story.
Right. And I feel like we should also say this too. It's not like we're big, renowned authors, so we're not slamming this guy just because we think he can't write. He obviously can.
Yes.
But it just did not click with us.
Nothing about this is against the author. We just didn't necessarily enjoy this book, and we're going to explain why in more specifics.
But yeah, so I feel like the best example, and we're going to get into spoilers now.
Yes, now we will be getting into spoilers.
So at the very end, I feel like this last sentence kind of explains it perfectly. And it's going to be funny because I feel like once this uploads to YouTube and people are going to see it, people are going to, like, hear me read this sentence, and they're going to be like, oh, that's beautiful. And they're like, he didn't get it? What did he? But this is, like, the last sort of, like, paragraph. I'm going to start a couple sentences back. But it goes, on their backs were vernacular patterns that were maps of the world and its becoming. Maps and mazes of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again. In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery. So, to put this in perspective, before, like, the story ends with the man dying and the boy kind of finding new survivors, and it's just going off with them. And then you have a little bit of character interaction with them, and then it kind of sets off. And then it starts talking about, like, it talks about it, that once there was a brook and the trout streams and the mountains, and then it just talks about that, and then it ends with in the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than men, and they hummed a mystery. That feels like it's so out of place, and so, like, some people may be like, oh, that's up to interpretation. It's like it makes you think. No, I don't think so.
Right.
I think it's one of those sentences he thought I was like, oh, that sounds really cool, and then he just left it at the end. He's just like, all right, the end. And that's that sums up the book, because there's no plot. It just, you go. It feels like an opening sequence the whole time.
And it basically could have just ended with the end, and I still would have, like, to me, I don't like when books do that, because just how we grew up, it was always said, like, not to do that. So if, like, a just adult book ends with that, it just feels like, oh, wow, that was abrupt. And that's how I felt like this ending was, even though it didn't say the end. That's what it felt like. And yeah, honestly, it just didn't feel in place, especially with how the rest of the book was described.
Yeah.
The best I could make out of, which there was a lot of allusions to the Bible and just mentioning of God and such, which I did enjoy, because I thought people in the apocalypse, like, that are still keeping up, like, have hope for everything and are religious, are going to really focus on that. So I thought that was a really interesting point that was made throughout the book. And with this, I thought maybe this was alluding to just mankind and God, but
what is that one meme? It's just like, I'm gonna butcher it so bad, but it's just like the relentlessness of, like, the world, and then, like, the indomitable spirit of man. It's kind of like that.
Yes, of the light. And
yeah, because, like, so I'll kind of get into more spoilers here. So the wife just decides to go die at the beginning, Like it talks about that, and she's just like she doesn't want to live anymore because she sees like uh, living in the apocalypse is just kind of pointless. It's not living; it's just surviving, which makes a lot of sense. And is that I like that portion because it added more backstory to the guy and the kid. But then she just kind of leaves, and like she goes, and you assume she dies. She probably does.
Right.
And like the whole it goes on with like the kid's like really sad that his mom's died, yada yada, and then you get to a point where like they have this little phrase they say back and forth. They're just like, "Cause we're the ones carrying the torch, or is it carrying the torch or carrying the fire? Carrying the fire." Yeah, like we're the ones carrying the fire, right? We're the good guys, and it's like I like that theme. I like that they said it kind of back and forth to keep each other going, and I that is what kind of kept the book or kept me interested in the book at least to finish it, just because I did enjoy like that kind of theme of like is the human spirit going to give out first, or is like just the relentless forces of like nature? So that was cool.
It was definitely a big focus on whether the like man versus nature would like who was going to win that due to the connection between these characters. Like, could that between the father and the son, could they hold their bond, keep hope and everything in order to beat nature, which was just the whole entire world being in flames and ash and everything.
Which it doesn't explain, which is annoying.
Yeah, it's an apocalyptic book that explains nothing about the apocalypse, which isn't always necessary, but I genuinely had no idea why the road would sometimes turn into like just melting tar. I guess it was extremely hot. However, how was that not affecting them? And it was also winter at the same time.
Always winter.
Yeah, it was always winter, but then somehow the road was turning into like the tar was turning back into melting because it was so hot. It was weird.
I guess that like some people might like that it's undefined, which is like it's like mysterious, which I think I would have if you would have taken like a supernatural aspect to it and added some like spiritual stuff, then maybe I would have been intrigued. Right. But it's just them getting like traveling down the roads and just being miserable, and they run into like some pretty like bad people, right? And they the conflict is like I enjoyed those parts where it was like dealing with them having to, evade cannibals, or like at the beginning when he has to shoot that guy because it takes his son. Like, I did enjoy all that.
You did?
I did.
You did. I felt like it always got cut off short. It was like, oh, okay, this is getting interesting. Some kind of conflict, which, let me say, took like 100 pages in to get to any sort of interaction, really. Yeah. And then you would get there and you'd be like, how is he going to get out of this? This is like, I'm excited to see what's happening. And then, suddenly he shoots someone and then they run away. And somehow the rest of the group doesn't chase after where that bullet came, even though they were like 20 feet from where the group was. It just seemed unrealistic, and it didn't take a lot. It didn't take a lot of mind games. You didn't know what was going on in the character's head exactly while that was happening until after. And just all the action ended really quickly.
That's true, yeah. It didn't spend a lot of time there. The tension was there, but not.
Right, and even towards the end, the father got shot by an arrow in the leg, which caused him to ultimately die from bleeding out. But when he was
was it an infection?
Yeah, I think so. Cause it wasn't bleeding out because he stapled his leg together. But it was some sort of infection.
Oh, it was a disease he'd been fighting the whole time. I think it was like cancer.
He was sick for a while, but when he was shot, that was like the longest, most like action sequence because it was like back and forth. He had to figure out. He shot a flare gun.
And he killed a guy with a flare gun.
Yeah.
Which it didn't that part was kind of hard to follow.
It was.
I thought that was kind of hard to follow because you kill or he kills this guy, and I'm like, okay, I think I'm following. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't mention the dead body, really. It felt like kind of just, went straight past that, and then like it didn't make sense what the woman said. That's what really bugged me.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, because she was just like he did that, and then like he walks in and like the woman's like crying over her dead husband, and then he's just like standing there and he's just like, she goes, why did you do that, or something so stupid. It was just like, absurd. What do you mean?
Like, especially after her husband or partner, whatever, this person that she had been with through the apocalypse just died, and she's like, why did you do that? Like, what? He just walked up there casually, saw that he was dead, woman's yelling, why'd you do that? And then he just walks away. I was like, how? There should have been more tension, because why wouldn't this woman attack him for, like, being just angry that he just killed?
Yeah. So not only, so there's that. They didn't take that angle, and also I just thought it was the stupidest. Like, it just didn't feel realistic, because he walks up there, and she goes, why would you do that, you asshole, whatever. But like, it's just like, what do you mean? Why would he do that? He got shot by an arrow by your husband. It's just so stupid. I wish we could find the exact quote. I forgot to annotate that, but it was just like, it peeved me. I was like, what? And then they just move on.
Right.
There's a lot of build up, and there's no payoff to really anything. They don't even find, like, they're like, oh, we're going to get to the coast, and things are going to get better. But they just don't. They don't find anybody else. They don't find another group. And there's no hope, because you can't, like, grow crops or just, like, survive. So then, even at the end, when there's like a glimmer of hope, and they're like, I'm carrying the torch, you know, I'm moving with these like new people that are nice, and we're gonna keep going. But they're literally doomed. Like, there's no hope.
Which, going into that, like, from the very beginning, you know that they have to follow this road, aka like why this is the name of the book. And they're following this to the coast, but we don't ever know what exactly is going to happen when they get to the coast. And when they finally make it there, suddenly they're like, oh yeah, we have to find the people now. And we're like, whoa, what people? Because up until then, you did not want to interact with anyone because everyone was a bad guy, which understandably, because everyone's fighting for just themselves. But then the sudden mention of people was just, like, genuinely caught me off guard, where I made a note saying, like, when was I supposed to, like, find out about this, and why did they wait until literally page 243 to mention that? And, like, this whole other goal. And so that just felt off-putting. Yeah. And, like, he didn't really know where he was going when he first started.
Right. Well, I mean, that didn't really bother me too much, because, me personally, just because I knew they were heading for the coast for some reason. But, like, they got to there and they're like, oh, we're going to find the people. That's a good point. Like, they've been avoiding them the whole time. And if it's a group, they're probably not going to like them, because the dad's just, like, super paranoid about that, rightfully so, because a bunch of cannibals. But, I don't know. It just, there's no payoff at all. And that really did get on my nerves, because, like, and then, like, people, I've seen comments about, like, under the reviews of, like, the books and everything, and people are like, the boy stands for God and Jesus, or something, like, not like that, but it's so, they're trying to make symbols out of these characters, and no, doesn't work for me.
Especially when the author, which I don't believe the author speaks too much about his books. He likes to say to himself, but, like, he did an interview with Oprah specifically on this book, and he said the purpose of writing this book was just because he wanted to express his connection with his son. It wasn't like there was some further meaning, like it was supposed to be God and the child.
That's what it felt like. I feel like people dig a lot more into these books, which is, like, cool that you can. Yes. But in this one specifically, I don't see where they're getting the symbolism from the father and the son, especially in a spiritual sense. Because it just, like, obviously, like, the son is innocence, and then the father is just, like, callous. Protection, callous. Just, I don't know.
Which, how about we go into more specific, the two main characters, I guess. and maybe some of the antagonists they run into. So we'll start with the father.
Okay.
My opinion personally, like I had no connection to the father, and this was the main person they focus on. Like the boy is still a very important part. However, even though it's third person, it was kind of going more onto what the father was thinking and everything of that sort. And I just could not connect to him at all.
I could a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could because I don't know. He just had like the love for his son.
Oh, you have a son?
Yeah, no, I have a son. No, I just thought like their relationship I thought was kind of relatable because he just cared a lot for him, and then he was just mourning. He's mourning pretty much the whole time, just his like the world, his mom, not his mom, his wife, and
Right.
I guess to me the father was the most relatable one. The son is like a kind of I hate that apocalypse movies do this, and I think The Road started it because it's like the kid that's born into this like terrible world. They're always like the hope. They're just like the good, but I just don't see. I don't think that's accurate. First off, because if a kid is growing up around like just death everywhere, they're gonna get so like used to it and just don't care. Like they're gonna get so like they're gonna be mean. That's what I'm getting at. I don't think it's accurate. And I think he's like the kid's like this Jesus figure, and he always wants to help, and he's just like super super kind. And I don't think that would be accurate. I think his character is annoying for that reason.
It was very weird. See, I was opposite. I liked the boy more because it's still a child and he doesn't exactly know what's going on. And I thought it was interesting seeing him like experience things that we get in our everyday life, kind of like like peaches. I think they ran into a can of peaches and just other things, and he was so just surprised by it. And he thought like birds weren't real and that was just a mythical creature. Like it was interesting seeing the how a boy would react growing up from the very beginning in Apocalypse. However, it was weird when he still wanted to help, even though throughout the book the father was like, we're not helping anyone, they're all bad.
And almost all of them were bad.
Yes, and I was like...
And he grew up seeing... Like, they go in that one house, and there's just that cellar full of people that they're eating.
Yes, and...
Which is... That was... Okay, if you like horror, I enjoyed that part. I thought it was creepy, and I was just like... I enjoyed that part. I was like... Oh, because his description was off the chart, and it really gets to you, like, get queasy.
Yeah. Nice. I wish it was all just based along this house that was there and the people, because I think that was the most exciting part, and that didn't come until like about 2/3 through the book, and I think that was the climax of the story. I really couldn't find a climax.
Was it the climax?
No,
actually, that's the thing. No, there's not really a plot. There is, but there isn't. No, there is a plot. Go to point A to point B, and then along the way, they do a lot of like menial tasks here, and I think he was like, I feel like he was kind of flexing his like prose. Like he knew he could write, so he was just kind of flexing on how good he just could describe it. It was kind of pretty at sometimes. Like I kind of enjoyed reading through that, but for the most part, it was boring as hell.
Yeah. Like there were definitely some good quotes. Like my favorite, I would say, was honestly at the very beginning, and I thought it was a really good start, and it made me excited to read the book. It was, he knew only that the child was his warrant. He said, if he is not the word of God, God never spoke.
Oh, like, yeah. I remember reading that, and I was like, that is a cool quote. There's a lot of quotable moments.
I really felt like that showed the love for his child, and I wish that continued throughout. Like, it was such a strong start, and then I just was so disappointed. Like, there were a few more quotes throughout the book that I liked, but nothing topped that, which was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, wasn't that on page 5?
That was, yep, page 5. So...
I mean, and like you said, like, you made this point earlier, and, like, I really felt like that, too, but it feels like a beginning sequence, at least for half of it. And with the beginning, like, I was drawn in, like, up until, like, I would even say, like, page 50, I was just, like, I always give books a chance at that point, but, like, I was just like, man, this seems really interesting. I hope I hope they delve into a lot of things and like this has some payoff because there's a lot of like building up. But no, it goes all the way to the end just like that.
There was no, like, genuinely, I don't know where the climax was because it never felt like there was any up and
Right.
down. Like, it was just throughout, which sometimes literary fiction is like that. And honestly, there have been plenty of books that I've enjoyed that just kind of dive into people's just living their life. Like, it wasn't necessarily the genre that bothered me or anything because this can be like my kind of stuff. Some of my favorite books don't really reach an exact climax, but this never kept my interest. Like, I was interested throughout the beginning because we were still in the beginning, but then when the rest of the book felt like we were still in the beginning, I was like, I don't care. I honestly didn't care to finish it, but I hate not finishing a book because it gives me anxiety because I want everything done.
Me too.
And make sure that I didn't miss anything.
Me
and
too.
also, I kind of had to finish it for this.
Yeah.
But
and it was so funny because when I recommended this book to start, I was just like, oh, I literally haven't heard a bad review. Like, this is like Pulitzer Prize winning. Like, we're gonna love this. And wow, I was like, it's kind of surprising that we hated it so much. Well, not hated it, but we just disliked it so much. You hated it.
I have genuine beef with the story, but that's beside the point.
Is the wife the antagonist?
Yeah.
Is she an antagonist in the story? Is she a bad person?
She did really hold an effect on both the father and the son.
Or his mom kind of imprinted on him? Like, was it still in that stage where you need a mom? And, like, he has this kind of view of her that's like, oh, mom was so great. She was so sweet to me.
I wouldn't say so. Like, the kid was old enough to remember, but young enough where he really didn't get that. And so he didn't understand. Like, I felt like he didn't have a good or bad opinion. And he would just curiously ask questions. And the father didn't know how exactly to explain this to his son and just felt guilty for him not having that person to grow up with.
Yeah.
And I think the father thought that the wife was selfish for leaving and still held that, even though he had all this love for her too at the same time, which I think was an interesting just relationship. But they didn't dive enough into it, in my opinion. Like, it was mentioned.
That is like the thing that I remember that caught my attention the most. I was super invested in the mom, why she left, and all of that. I will say that little tiny like sort of arc in itself was executed well, and I was very intrigued, and I think that was the only thing that really had payoff, in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wish he like expanded on it more because that was the most interesting part. Like even throughout, like at a certain point, they mentioned the mom like, oh, I miss her. Well, yeah, I get that, but like I wanna know more backstory.
There's very little backstory, which I think says, and same with not having names, which is just briefly touched on of how, you've lost that part of you. You don't have a career. That's not like something that you hold to yourself anymore, which is very important nowadays. Like, you are thought of as your job for a lot of things. So like that we never learned. We never learned their names because that wasn't important because there was no one to call them by their names. And I just wish that was also dived into more. Altogether, everything felt unfinished, which I think was my biggest beef with the book and what I think could have been improved.
Right.
More specifically, should we go into?
Well, actually, I wanted to add this. We have this specific view on the book, and like we're like, there's no payoffs, no plot, and I would like to hear. I think in like the comments, if somebody like thinks differently, I would really like to see their viewpoint and like how they got there, or like.
Right. Yeah. If you saw something in this book, and I know it's connected with a lot of people, I would love to hear that because maybe we're just missing something. It's not necessarily hard for me to connect to a book, but it's not the easiest.
Yeah.
Especially when it's written in a way that I didn't necessarily like, because
writing style is important.
Yes, and I like a different stylistic choice, but the conversations just felt unrealistic. The characters felt unrealistic for what was going on. The environment felt unrealistic.
And it was like, and I think those are all valid criticisms, because this is supposed to be like, this whole story is supposed to be shrouded in like realism. Like, it's not going into like supernatural, like, like far-fetched themes. It's just real. It's supposed to feel real, and like
the relationships are supposed to make us feel connected.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
show us how a father and son could go through the apocalypse and still hold hope, and I just never got that.
Yeah, I think I could look past the realism of the world, or like the realism of like the plot, or like fight scenes, or what have you. I could look past all of that if the characters are realistic. I think that's the biggest thing that's like in just writing fiction in general. The characters need to seem realistic. And the father, okay. The mother, really realistic and interesting.
But there were like 5 sentences about her.
Yeah, and she's so much more interesting than both of them, I swear. And like her whole situation, her attitude, like I was really invested in that. And then like I said earlier, the son kind of didn't really catch my attention. Yeah. And I don't know, for good fiction, you have to be interested in the characters, which is like why I love Stephen King so much, because he's so character based, and his writing style has punctuation, and it really draws you in. And like you almost get to know these characters through the narrator, even if it's like third person a lot of times. And I felt like what we got to know about these characters was intensely surface level.
Yes. Again, it was telling instead of showing. And I don't even necessarily have to like the character, but they need to have something.
No, yeah, I don't have to like him at all.
Yeah. I think that was like just the hardest thing. Like, I love the idea of a father and son connection, bringing them through this world, especially for however many years this had already been going on, that we didn't even get to see in this book. I love this idea, but it was just not how I wanted it to be explored, I guess.
Right. Like I said, that father and son trope, I love it. And they didn't do it like this. I don't know if it did. It may have started that trope, especially in like apocalypse sort of settings for books. Yeah. But if anybody knows or has seen The Last of Us, I don't think you've played the video game, have you?
No.
Or I played the video game. We'll watch people play it, and I got so invested in that trope, and with those two characters, Joel and Ellie, like their relationship was so much more intriguing and layered, and just like well paced and thought out, that it was executed so much better than this, because you really get to know those characters like Joel and Ellie on like a very personal level, and understand their quirks and their motivations and how they differ and how they're complex. Here it's just very surface level, and I think I don't know if he made them purposefully dull so like people can like put them in their place or put themselves in their place. But yeah, no, I think this trope was done so much better. It could have been so much better if the characters were more realistic, and I don't think they were.
So, overall, I wouldn't recommend this book. As you've heard, there's some saving grace, and the idea is brilliant, but the book overall, I think you can skip. I think you can get the same idea. I think if you read the first 50 pages, you'll get the same idea for the rest.
Yeah, you can just skip the end.
Yeah. There was no payoff.
I'm the same way, and it's not like I didn't enjoy it, because I did enjoy parts. But my big thing, especially for reading a book, and it differs from movies too, which we'll get to the movie later in another episode.
In the next episode, we will be covering the book the movie, and comparing it to the book, and really discover, is one of these worth it more than the other? Was the movie really realistically represented what happened in the book? We'll go over all that.
But yeah, no, the movie, we'll go over that more. But my opinion, I did enjoy parts, but the writing style is so important to me. Like, if you have a good writing style, you could write about just about anything, and I'll be there just because I like the way that it flows and it connects with my brain. This did not. I'm realizing that I really like punctuation, and I like the flow of like thought patterns and just like getting to know characters, but like this had none of that, and therefore I don't want to. I guess I would recommend it to some people. Some people that are like they really like the artsy fartsy. Maybe they like it more than I would.
You really like for a sentence to stretch for half the page. I think you would enjoy this book.
Yeah, I would. If you if you go to college and you major in English literature, like world literature or any sort of literature for any country, you probably like this.
Yeah, even though it felt out of this world because none of this felt real.
Yeah.
Genuinely, I felt like I had to be on a different planet because they didn't even touch on things that were of like the earth.
Yeah.
It just like, and it's not, it had been going on, the apocalypse had been going on for years, yet it seemed like they were already comfortable in this. Over time, having to survive in this, the world's going to seem further and further away, which they kind of did cover.
Yeah.
But it just, there was no mention of missing certain things that I think would really impact a person, just even the smallest things. It felt like the characters had no emotion. Like, the kid didn't know much about that, of course, but the father, I mean, he had a whole life before all this, and then for some reason during the apocalypse, he had never mentioned missing
certain things.
Yeah.
And so, I think this would be my closing statement. It's not a bad book. It's not. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
I can't say it's a bad book because I think, like I said, there's things I enjoyed, and I think people can enjoy it. I just did not.
I think, well, we are in the minority when it comes to liking this book. So apparently there are a ton of people that like this. So it might just be us again.
Yeah.
But I think it requires a very specific person to be able to get into this book. Not necessarily hate this, even though I would say that this is one of the books that I've read and hated. That, excluding books that were just generally negative and bad for certain people, excluding all that, I really hated this book. But I don't think that a lot of people will hate this. They just might not like it.
Yeah. I think, like I mentioned, writing style earlier, like, maybe this just isn't compatible with my brain, but like, there might be people that read it and they're just like, it literally mimics their thoughts. And they're like, oh, I love this. Yeah. But yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, next week we will be discussing the movie of The Road and diving into that and comparing it to the book.
And we do have different opinions about this one too. We might flip-flop.
And we will share overall what we thought of both of those.
We'll wrap it up for the book and, tune in next week for the movie review.
All right. See you guys.